Louise, if I come around this way a bit further.
Okay, so we're live. I'm just waiting for everyone to take their seats. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation today on becoming an ally for maltreating parents, exploring socioeconomic factors that lead to maltreatment. I'm the parent who lost my children to the foster care system due to maltreatment. I'm also an emerging child, youth and family practitioner. 4 of my children were reunified, 3 have remained in out-of-home care, and 1 has been born in the time since. Sorry, you can't see that screen, it's black. I'll send you guys the slides as well so you can see if it's a bit hard to see the screen. 3 have remained in out-of-home care and 1 has been born in the time since and had no involvement with child safety. So my lived experience combined with my academic knowledge has taught me that experiencing a low socioeconomic lifestyle can contribute to a parent maltreating their children when if that socioeconomic situation were different, the issues they struggled with could have been more readily addressed before children were harmed. I'm really sorry, that screen is black, but we will send you out the slides as well. So, do you want to maybe try shutting the curtains for me? With the theme of this conference being equity and diversity, I am excited to present to you today a new way of observing and responding to maltreating parents. As social and human services professionals, we are uniquely positioned to have a deeper understanding of reasons why people might maltreat their children. This in turn, that made it worse. This in turn gives us the option of responding to maltreating parents with compassion and respect for the intersecting issues of oppression that they struggle with. In this way, we can help to break the cycle of trauma, the potential cycle of internalized oppression and acting out trauma against children by becoming an ally of social justice and teaching self-compassion to the maltreating parents we work with. When I was a single mother of 7 with undiagnosed mental health issues, homeless on the streets in a regional area, I had no way of getting out of the situation my children and I were stuck in. I'd known for a long time that I was often too angry at my children for their behaviour, and that my responses were abusive. I knew it was wrong for me to stay in bed for days at a time and allow the children to feed and clean themselves. And I'd even been to health services to explain what I was experiencing and to beg them for help, but none came. Parents who maltreat often do so because they're marginalised, and that means they can't access services that can help them when they face a parenting struggle. As I look back now, I'm acutely aware that money in its simplest form would have solved so many of my problems. If I could have afforded to move to a city where there were support services, if I could have afforded to go to a psychiatrist and be diagnosed and medicated, if I could have afforded even a nanny to care for my children or a cleaner to make sure the house was hygienic when I was too depressed to do these things myself. But instead I struggled, I repeated the cycle of abuse and shame, and I internalized my oppression as an abuser, a doll bludger, and a failure as a woman. Maltreating parents often suffer from marginalization and oppression due to socioeconomic factors. This leads them to actions which ultimately result in their children's removal. They don't have access to services which could help them, as discussed above. The problem is not that maltreating parents are demons or that they're psychologically different to quote-unquote good parents. The problem is that people operate within different spheres of experience which can impact their parenting decisions either positively or negatively, and they then internalize and operate from this opinion of themselves, which is imposed upon them by others via judgment. So look at a case study now. Picture 2 mothers with almost identical lives, and identical childhoods and identical school experiences. The only difference is their socioeconomic status. They give birth to 2 children in 2 years, the eldest of whom is neurodivergent. Mother number 1 is in a high socioeconomic situation. Before giving birth, she worked in a reasonably high-paying professional job. Mother number 2 is in a low socioeconomic situation. She left school in grade 10 and worked a number of blue-collar jobs before becoming pregnant. Both mothers begin to display mental health issues exacerbated by the stress of 2 children under 2, one of whom continues to show challenging behaviours. Mother number 1 can immediately access her savings or her maternity leave pay to obtain swift professional analysis of her child's behaviour. Not only that, but due to her internalized self-concept as someone who succeeds and is doing well in life, she subconsciously feels that her child's behavioural issues are coming from an external source and that she can be supported to manage this. Mother number 2, however, doesn't even realize that her child's behavior is not her fault. Over the course of her life, she has internalized that she is a failure, that she isn't very good at anything she attempts to do. Therefore, when her child begins to display challenging behaviors and she starts to feel that she can't cope, she subconsciously feels that something she isn't doing enough of is the cause. She isn't parenting properly or she isn't strict enough. She tries to control the situation, and when it does not improve, she feels worse about herself and escalates further. Mother number 1 has a large home which she owns, and she can create a safe space for her children to live in, so that even though the behavior of her oldest child is still challenging, she can make sure that child has space to retreat to if they're overstimulated, and that her younger child has room to move away from their sibling if they're afraid. If her child damages her home, she can pay someone to come and make improvements. Twice a week, she pays someone to come and clean her house while she takes her children to the park and spends quality time with them. Once a week, she pays a support service to take her neurodivergent child on excursions and activities, which gives her time to rest and recuperate from the demands of caregiving. Even though it's extremely hard being the mother of a special needs child, she can cope with the tools which are available to her. Mother number 2's children, however, share a room within her small government unit. It is filthy and there are holes in the wall and pen marks scribbled everywhere. She can't do anything to improve this, and every time she attempts to clean the unit, her neurodivergent child immediately destroys something else. Her youngest child, who is getting little of their mother's attention due to her constant need to care for the older child and try to maintain the home, begins acting inappropriately as well, doubling the amount of mess, noise, and chaos in the home. The older child constantly hits and scratches the younger, as there is nowhere for them to go but under each other's feet. The younger child becomes more aggressive in response, creating a behavioral issue that may not have been there ordinarily. Mother number 2 wakes up every morning wishing she had not woken up at all, with the prospect of another day in her filthy, chaotic, miserable home. Her mental health deteriorates, and she begins to use unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as locking herself in a room on her computer. When her children scream and cry, the neighbors complain, and sometimes the police are called when her neurodivergent child screams. Soon, anytime the children make loud noise, she hits them in an attempt to get them to shut up. Sometimes she gives up and just waits for the knock at the door from either the police or child safety. She is experiencing marginalization at the most extreme level. As social and human service workers, we're most likely going to come across people in similar situations to mother number 2 in the course of our work. It is important that we don't label them or judge them, because hopefully we can know from our studies that they've most likely not chosen the situation that they are in, or to maltreat their child. Even in the cases of things like substance abuse or addiction, these actions are themselves symptoms of something that is traumatic in the lives of our clients. In the case of maltreating parents, their maltreatment of their child is a symptom of marginalization in their own lives. Negative labels can become internalized, causing a vicious cycle of oppression. It's important for social workers to act with understanding towards maltreating parents to avoid compounding their experience of oppression. We can't necessarily fix the situation they're in, and in most cases, our first response will be to ensure the safety of the child involved because they can't help themselves. But if we're called to work with a parent who has or is maltreating their child, so for example, if we're child safety workers, family support case managers, etc., we can have an impact on how those parents feel about themselves, which in turn could potentially help them to see that whether they're parenting their children at home because they learn skills and can reunify, or whether they co-parent with foster carers until their child is 18, they still have a choice of how to see themselves, because society could just write them off and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When parents have maltreated their child, they receive punishment and judgment. They go through child safety processes which are extremely traumatic, and they go through court. They experience the judgment of their peers and their social networks. I believe that if we teach maltreating parents that they can learn new skills, that they can choose a different way of seeing themselves and their situation, that we can improve outcomes for them and their children. Because regardless of whether the child is reunified or not, the parent can be involved in their life in a meaningful way. Often the problems which led to their children being taken away could have been solved if they had more money or access to supports, as we've already mentioned. So social workers can challenge embedded stereotypes of maltreating parents by modeling and promoting self-compassion and self-care, and by becoming an ally for social justice. In this way, maltreating parents can change their internalized oppression, learn skills to improve their situation, and potentially reunify with their children or maintain a positive and healthy relationship with them outside of the home if necessary. In Australian society, we still have a punitive attitude towards maltreating parents, when in fact they are themselves often victims and deserve understanding and support. I think we know as social and human service professionals that it's important to practice self-compassion so that we don't burn out in the course of our work. But do we know how to help maltreating parents learn that they deserve self-compassion too? I think that it's very important for us to teach them this because nobody in their lives is going to show them that they deserve compassion except for us. And the more compassion they can show themselves, the more emotional reserves they will have to allocate to their child. We can become an ally for these parents instead of judging them, and we can use our knowledge of social justice to see them as victims of oppression instead of as perpetrators. When we start to change our mindset towards them to one of compassion and allyship, we want to see them succeed, which is in turn in the best interests of the children who love their parents no matter what. We want to see them overcome their marginalization and see how that outworks in their contact with their children. Maltreating parents are at risk of being permanently negatively labelled, and they often don't get the opportunity to move forward. If the social system in which we live were more equitable, parents who are currently in low socioeconomic situations wouldn't struggle so badly to raise their children and would potentially be able to avoid their children going into care. The more social service workers see themselves as an ally for justice for maltreating parents, the more they can positively impact their internal labelling. Modelling self-compassion shows maltreating parents that they are worthy of improving themselves, again positively impacting their internal labelling. The better their internal labelling, the better they can parent, whatever that looks like, which then in turn interrupts the negative traumatic cycle. Thank you for attending my talk today. I will be taking questions after a short 5-minute break, and I'm very sorry that you couldn't actually see the screen.